So this whole hiring process and recruitment process is just a peek into the employee experience. In fact, the employee experience potentially starts from that first reach out. From you putting your resume in and applying to that job, all the way to, you are an employee, right? I mean, all of that's the employee experience. And so however you're being treated, if, they're not responding.
It's like dating,
right?
Courtship. They should be courting you hard, right?
Hello. Maybe they're just not that into you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how they're going to be, though, when you're an employee. They're going to continue to treat you like shit. Nothing magic happens when you get on payroll, except now you're getting paid to be treated like shit, as opposed to being treated like shit during the recruitment process for free.
Exactly. Welcome to It Gets Late Early. Today I have with me Leigh Henderson, who is also known as HRManifesto on the socials and has had a long and wonderful career in corporate America across a variety of different industries and types of companies, and also has this really fantastic social following now. You're a content creator, right? That's what I would say about you. Is that what?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
I consider myself a content creator. Yeah. Mo, so wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have you here. I think what I love about you is you have the breadth of experience and all this knowledge from having actually done the work at these companies across a sphere of different industries, right? But you also have this amazing sort of comedic take on everything. And you actually put out there into the world what we are all thinking and cannot say. So that's just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's my honor to do so. I mean, I absolutely love it. I mean, it's cathartic for me, right? So at least now I have this therapeutic channel as I do work in corporate, so. I
believe it. So maybe share a little bit about your background and how you wound up getting into the world of content creation.
Absolutely. So I am and have always been an HR professional. I'm an HR executive today. I've been in HR for almost 20 years. So I've got a couple graduate degrees, went to business school. I've worked for a handful of Fortune 100s. And so I have seen just the full gamut of the human experience at work. I'll tell you what.
Oh, I bet you have.
Yeah. So I do. I love that I do have some street cred on the socials, that, hey, I've been in all those back rooms and I've experienced all these toxic leaders and CEOs. I've tried to coach them my entire career, so I'm definitely doing the Lord's work in corporate, I'll tell you what. But yeah, so, but like so many, right? I'm not immune to the toxicity in the workplace, because I'm in HR. Gosh, on the contrary. And so, like many others, when COVID hit and it was high stress and survival of the fittest almost, my God, especially in the workplace, I found myself in a toxic work situation and exited corporate, took a break, and went straight to content creation. So at my core, I'm super artsy fartsy. I always have been. I sing, I play instruments, I love comedy, I love art, I love museums, you name it. But you really can't be that creative, at least not in an artsy way, in the workplace, not a
PowerPoint decks don't quite hit the mark for you.
They really don't, And so the second I wasn't, preoccupied with work 24/7, I went straight to that creative outlet and I started writing a book. I'm 12,000 words in, passion project. Hopefully I finish that eventually.
You will. I'm excited to read it.
Yeah. I started writing this book on, surviving the workplace, just sharing, all the tips and tricks and experiences that I've had in my career. And I thought I really need to test content for this book to see if it's, approachable, applicable, relatable, you name it. And at that moment when I was thinking, what do I put this on? How do I share this stuff? Someone sent me a TikTok. I didn't even have the app. And so I downloaded the app.
What's this thing?
I know, what the hell, right? I'm a geriatric millennial, so I hadn't been on the TikTok. Yeah, I hadn't been on the TikTok yet, but I was certainly watching them, And so I downloaded the app, and that night I posted a couple videos. And that it's been now 2 years. I just keep posting them basically, so.
Awesome. So yeah, you're like, you've gone through the trauma of COVID and you've taken a step out and you're like, I got to start testing, and you just started putting it out there. Good for you.
Exactly. I found myself some boundaries. And so now I've been kind of sharing the same messaging to others, so
yeah.
It's been incredibly fulfilling and really the purpose of the content, because if you watch it, you may just see, it's snarky, it's cheeky, hopefully it's funny. But really,
it is all of those things.
Thank you. But really it does have a purpose, right? So when I create something, I am either obviously coaching, like literally I'm directing, like at the camera and I'm coaching, or I'm low key coaching, right? I'm showing you something cringy. I'm showing you something toxic, horrific. And what it does is it signals to folks that may be suffering in silence, like, oh my God, like, wow, like that's what I experience. And for the first time, a lot of people realize or recognize, oh my God, that looks horrific when I watch it, but I'm experiencing this in the workplace, but it's like my dirty little secret. I'm not sharing it with anybody. I thought this was okay, but you watch it, you realize it's not, so the purpose of the content is to, of course, a little levity, but really to connect people and for people not to feel alone, right? Like that is so important for me, for people to recognize that what you're experiencing is not unique. I promise. Right? As someone who has studied org behavior, like this is unfortunately what exists in a lot of workplaces, right? So feel alone no longer and take action, right?
Well, I have to tell you, that has been really nice for me. I mean, every single thing that you post pretty much, it's relatable, right? I've had at some point in my career something that approximates that experience. And it's so brutal. And you know what? Sometimes you just want to know that you're not alone. And so you are validating that this happens, that it's not just you, it's not in your head, no more gaslighting, right? Like it's legit. And so I really appreciate that. And I, for one, am someone who always tries to infuse some levity and a little bit of humor and lightheartedness into everything that I do, which I also try to bring to this podcast. And so you're an excellent person to do that as well. Important. So yeah, it is important. And I think it's, that especially after COVID, we all are looking for these unifying experiences. Like we all felt so isolated and alone that entire time. And so it's like, I feel for one that I have very deep PTSD from that era. So even these TikTok, platforms, these social media platforms, like I felt like they really served their purpose in that time to make us all feel like we're still together in some way, shape, or form. Of course, it also went the opposite way at many points as well, but we'll not get into that. But anyhow.
It is very unifying. And the majority of us have the universal shared experience of working, the workplace, right?
Lucky if you don't have that one, right?
I know, right? Not all of us are born rich, right? So it's like,
would be nice.
A lot of us are working, and so it's wonderful to have that connectivity in the socials. And to your point, especially during such a dire time as COVID, which again, universal shared experience, right? And so I think it did bring a lot of us together, and it created this conversation in a different way. Because, one of the questions that I'm always asked is, oh, well, the workplace is so different now than before. Time out. No, it's not, right? Because every generation coming in has its effect on the workplace. This is just happening yet again. It's just now we have social, and it's just, we see it now, right? I mean, it's just out there, so it's all these conversations and quiet quitting and all this has all been happening since the beginning of work. But now we're just having these, social conversations about it. It's more accessible to see it, so.
It is. Yeah. And I feel like it's more welcome. I mean, at least nominally welcome in practice. I'm not sure how many corporations are thrilled about all this authenticity, if you will, coming out there. But it's now something that I feel is almost expected. Employees, and hat tip to Gen Z on this. Like, I feel as though Gen Z has been like, yo, I will only work. Exactly. Like hat tip, like good for them. Because they have mandated things that actually benefit all of us at the end of the day. So, I mean, greater flexibility, that's pretty cool for anyone, especially people who get older, right? And they have responsibilities, maybe they have kids, maybe they have older parents that they need to work with and help through their lives, right? So it's like these things actually extend to other generations as well. So I'm really grateful for the Gen Z era.
Yeah, I mean, they've really infused this expectation of healthy boundaries and really the creation of a healthy relationship with work.
Yes.
And that's fascinating. And it's all because of what, is important to them as a generation. They've gone through wars and COVID and mass layoffs and financial crisis and you name it. And that's going to have an effect on somebody when you watch your parent come home and they've been laid off or whatever. And that's what Gen Z has experienced. We have to remember that. And so they realize that, gosh, what a waste of my life, my time for it to just all be work. I shouldn't be, living to work. I should be working to live. Right. And they're all about happiness and impact. And to me, that's just like, wow, because even as a geriatric millennial, I mean, it's like, I was very work, and
keep on climbing, go up that ladder. Right?
Exactly.
We thought that was the only way.
Yeah. And that's how we valued ourselves. Right. I mean, that's like, and money. And Gen Z has kind of come up like, oh no, it ain't all about money. And it's like, oh my gosh. You're right. I should have joy too. What?
Exactly. Can you have both? Oh my God. Wow. What a concept, right? Yeah. No, it's really true. I think they're pretty awesome. And I feel like we need to get away from that, horrible classification of people in different generations and that generation, that next, it's just such a thing that's happened over time. But, I'd love for you to tell me a little bit what you've seen in the workplace. Like, tell me about how you identify toxic cultures at work. Like, what are some of the red flags that you can see, maybe even before you join the company in the interview process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great question. And, it's one that I receive a lot, right? Because, of course, I'm on the socials talking about how to survive toxic workplaces. So, of course, a natural question is, well, what is toxic? And what's so fascinating, again, my opinion, I haven't done official research on this, right? But, my opinion is that toxicity is incredibly subjective. So people are always like, well, how do I fix my toxic workplace? And it's like, well, you can't fix what's not broken. So a workplace in its design is working for somebody, and that's why things don't get better or change, right? And so subjectively, you believe it's toxic because you don't fit there anymore. Your values are misaligned, right? It's not the best place for you to thrive and be successful, but that doesn't mean it's not working for all those, maybe, narcissists or sociopaths that love backstabbing and gaslighting and whatever else to get ahead, right?
Hitting the mark for them.
It's working for
10
somebody.
out of 10.
It's working for somebody, and the only person you can control is yourself. So again, this idea of a toxic workplace, it really isn't cookie cutter. It's super subjective. But some of kind of the top things, the signs of toxicity would be things like weaponized gossip, right? Like a lot of backstabbing, bus-surrendering, a lot of nepotism, favoritism, a lack of equity, a lack of procedural justice in the workplace, a lack of distributive justice. So this whole theme of just inequity, just across the board on everything, you're going to feel that. You're going to be like, why not me? You're going to ask yourself that question. How did they, get that? Why didn't I receive that? What the hell?
And that guy? Are you kidding me?
Are you kidding? Oh, the sour cream rises to the top yet again, right? I mean, it's just like, that guy's a freaking idiot, Yeah, and so you're going to see a lot of that. And then there's also this concept of psychological safety, as well as a lack of physical safety even, right? So you're going to see just an organization that doesn't care, right? There's no support. There's no safety, all the types of safety. You just don't feel valued as a human being. You know what I mean? And again, very subjective, because that may matter to you, but that might not matter to your peer sitting right next to you, right? So to them, it's not toxic. It's fine. It's working. It's a paycheck, right? But to you, you're like, this place is toxic as hell, right? I mean, I can't get ahead and it feels ugly to be here,
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. It is it's an individual thing. It's an individualized experience, the workplace. And, it's all just like a tapestry of different people, right? So it's going to work for some people. It's not going to work for others. If you happen to be related to the CEO, that might be cool. Like, hey, it's just, if you happen to be a dude, maybe a white dude, that might be even better for you. But it's just, it's an interesting thing. But to your point, you have to be really sort of dialed into how you feel as an individual. And I think, I want to ask you a little bit about what you've seen with regard to age within the corporate workplace. Like, have you heard things from people who you've been coaching on toxic workplaces on this? Have you seen things from an organizational perspective? Like, how is age viewed? And particularly, I guess I'm very interested in older age, but I know that age bias and discrimination extends across the entire spectrum of ages because humans suck. So.
I know, right? Yeah, exactly. They certainly can. And there's bias. There's bias in everybody. You, me, everybody, right? It's just hopefully you're not, doing the illegal ones.
Hopefully, would be nice.
And definitely not acting on it in the workplace. And if you are, hopefully someone keeps you in check. But yeah, there is a lot of bias just naturally in any system with people, right? To your point, because people suck sometimes. Now, where I've seen it, in my career, it's primarily going to be in the younger employees, right? So it's very rare, actually, that most organizations are run as meritocracies, where performance matters more than seniority. Right.
You heard it here first.
Okay. Right. Yeah. And so I love those organizations because why not have a 24-year-old executive? If they're the highest performer, they're the superstar and rock star, everyone should be given their due, their chance, their opportunity on the basis of their performance, right? And ultimately how they serve the customer and their coworkers and the clients and each other and the shareholders, whoever they're serving, right? And so where I have seen a lot of bias is on the green, the young, the kids. The kids, I still hear, you hear that all the time.
You kids.
The kids, the youngins, this, that, right? And that is not illegal, right? So that's why that's very open in the workplace. Exactly.
At least federally, it's not.
Exactly, right? People will have policies and whatever overarching and whatever. And hopefully it's not to a point where it's like creating a hostile work environment with like bullying and abusive behaviors. But typically it's just in the verbiage and, the process, the policy, you'll see that come out. I think that, again, in the organizations I've been a part of and across my peers and whatnot, we of course talk, right? I'm well networked, in HR. There are a lot of protections, for 40 and over. Again, we're talking U.S. and federal protections, right? To where you really won't hear that very direct language, the same that you would. You see what I mean? With the young, right? It'll be more indirect bias as like, that person gets paid a lot. Well, why do they get paid a lot? Oh, well, because they've been here 30 years. So perhaps it's time to exit or what, you know what I mean? So it won't be like, oh, that guy's old and we don't want him anymore. It's, we have a cost cutting exercise that we need to. So it's very indirect, sometimes perhaps even, not conscious bias, subconscious bias even, but it's typically like under the guise of something, whether it's favoritism or it's financially motivated, but again, it's still bias. It's just they make it sound a little sweeter, I guess. They try and roll it in sugar or misdirect that.
Mary
it's not
Poppins
about
that
age.
Shit, right?
They Mary Poppins that shit. Exactly. To make it a little more palatable and less illegal looking,
Yeah. So, the optics do matter.
Yeah, all that bias exists at both spectrums, the extremes, and then the middle. No one cares about us in the middle for the most part, depending on your industry. But those two extremes, those are coming up constant.
No, it's really true. So over the past few years, tech companies and all of corporate America has started, giving a shit about diversity, equity, and inclusion, at least performatively, right? But what I found in my research is that actually 92% of these initiatives do not include age as a factor, even though, at least for specifically tech, age is an underrepresented group in this industry. So I'm curious your thoughts on, what can organizations do to increase their age inclusivity and bring those sorts of policies and procedures into their DEI initiatives?
Wow. I think that, that's a great question. And I would say I'm totally aligned with you and the research just from my experience, especially in the US. It is very much so color. And then I would say second, the focus would be gender. And I even would say that's a far second, in my opinion, because we have a ways to go. And so age doesn't even hit the conversation. I'm not even kidding. It doesn't even hit the conversation 92% of the time, just like a lot, the majority of the time, we're not even really talking about that. You know what I mean? Just because my opinion is that we have such a long way to go on all of them. Let's be honest. You know what I mean? There's such a long way to go on all of them.
Such a long way.
And since, very few things are, I'd say, federally mandated, right? State mandated, regulated, you name it. It's really on to an individual employer to create a policy, a practice, something to put in their system to ensure, DEIB really for the organization across all the different points of diversity. And so, you asked the question, how organizations can really even just start the conversation, of, diversity in the sense of age. And it's literally starting the conversation.
Making it okay to say it out loud.
Recognizing it, because again, just my experiences, that's not even on the table, right? And that is because we had the 40-year-old, thing in the state. So it's like, then we don't even think about the belongingness just across the full sphere of ages. It's kind of fascinating in a way. We haven't got to the microaggressions or the micro inequities or, because we're still flat out on the shit. We just need diversity in the first place. We just need to be hiring different people even. We need to be more open to inclusivity. Like we're so basement in a lot of these areas. We can't even get to, some of these, right? So it's fascinating. And, what an organization does, again, it's just a group of people trying to figure things out. They really align to the shiny things, right? They really align to what the headlines are, right? Because leaders will need to respond to a headline because they have the expectation from their employees and shareholders or wherever to respond to something in the news, right? And so what hits the news the majority of the time is going to be race. And so, especially in the United States, right? And so that's really what's driving DEIB initiatives in an organization. Again, subset of people that's reflective of a community. And that's what they're experiencing and that's what they're seeing in the headlines, right? And so that's why that is the core focus. And honestly, we are shitty at that.
Yeah,
we're not that great across all of them, like I mentioned,
We are awful.
Yeah, we have ways to go. I'll put that. We have opportunities, right?
Yes, there we go. That's very positive spin there. We have opportunities for improvement, just like you would hear in, a performance review.
Exactly. Coming from a Hispanic female trying to survive corporate. Holy shit.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. It's been, it's rough. It's rough out there. But I think to your point, there is an element of people are going to do what is driven by news cycles and what is going to get views and what is going to get them, the kudos or the accolades, right? They're going to need that to be a driving factor. And so far, you haven't seen a lot of like smoking gun. Oh my gosh, this old person, had a horrible experience. You don't see that as much. And you kind of have to dig for those headlines. But what I found really intriguing is that in Silicon Valley, in tech companies, there are 28% more age discrimination cases than race or gender, which is so fascinating to me because also, at least federally, you have less of a shot at getting anything out of that case than you do with race or gender. Because as I found out, as I interviewed some attorneys, some employment attorneys on this topic, for age discrimination to be proven, it has to be the defining like smoking gun factor versus race or gender can just be kind of like a throw it in there. It could have been somewhat involved and that can be enough to actually have you lose a suit. So it's interesting that there's a higher burden of proof that is required for anything age related. And, I'm curious why that is, like how that's come to be. But I think that we have so much work to do, to your point, like these other things, this is the one thing we all share, the age thing. And so I think maybe that's why it hasn't gotten focused, because it's just kind of a natural progression. Like everybody gets there, right? If you're lucky and you make it and you keep breathing, which is cool. So I think that might be it. But it's just, it's interesting to me, like that this is something that to your point, I don't even think it's on the radar of companies, because I can, you get these little promotional materials, or you go on someone's website and you'll see a picture of their team, right? And I mean, you can tell the tokenism in those photos. Like you see it, it's obvious. Yeah. So rarely do I see
gender and race.
Yes. And so rarely do I see a different age, like a visibly older person represented. I mean, I can tell you, I joined a company and so looking for red flags through the interview process, is one thing. But like if you accept a job thinking you've cleared all of those, and then the first thing that you receive is literally a YouTube video that is showing the first day of an employee at this new company. And it's a person who looks around about 20 years old, probably waking up in her parents' house for the first time and going to work. And she gets there and there are pizza parties and karaoke. And literally there's not even a single person over the age of 30, probably, in that entire video. And I'm like, wow, what have I done? Where am I going? Right? Like, and that's the thing. Like, it really, it's funny because it just doesn't even come up. Like, no one, it's just not even on the radar. It's interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, really those sorts of videos, and especially like the recruitment videos and the things you'll see on websites, I mean, they are really targeted to attract like next gen talent, obviously.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so, I mean, that
cheap
really
and cheerful.
is, from a bias perspective, I mean, that's exactly who they're trying to attract, right? There's always this full page on university and interns and blah, 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 but never any sort of mid-career leadership program or mid-career entry or late career or rehired pensioner or retirement returns or whatever. And that's this whole subset of the population that is still so, knowledgeable and with such expertise to share. And it's just such an untapped place, from a recruitment and talent acquisition perspective for the majority of organizations. And even just part-time work, flexible work, right? Which gets into, of course, inclusivity and DEIB at its core, right? Is giving folks access across, all these spaces. That's unseen. So you really do see those materials very, very targeted to that next gen. Exactly who they're trying to attract and who they want to hire. And that labor is incredibly inexpensive. And ironically, though, it is a huge, I want to say the word drag just because I am trying to find a more proper word, but it's a lot of work for more senior employees, to manage and coach and train those employees. Totally worthwhile. Don't get me wrong, but it is pulling on the expertise of perhaps someone like me, to be able to bring that person up to speed and along from an efficiency perspective versus like an awesome mid-career, hire that can just come in and hit the ground running. And so you need both. You need pipeline for the future, but you also need expertise in-house. And so we shouldn't shy away from targeting mid-career and older, talent. I mean, you need them. You need it all,
Yeah. You really do need it all. I mean, that's the whole point. Like it's getting a bunch of different types of people is going to make the outcome a lot better. Like we all know that. We know that just because intellectually it makes sense. But how often do we see it in practice? So Leigh, can you tell me a little bit about maybe what you could see as an interview red flag, like as a job searcher? What could you be looking for that could indicate that you might be walking into kind of a toxic workplace?
Oh, great question. And I'll tell you what, I mean, I probably have 100, videos on this on social, because, I am a toxic interview survivor, myself. I have really put myself through some shit, like professionally. Like I have, I have all these hilarious stories. Some I've shared, where I'm the one being interviewed, and why I put up with, the things I did in the past. I have no idea.
Oh my gosh.
But I don't foresee that
you're
in
one
my
about.
future.
I'm just remembering the one that you recently posted that was like, hey, can you explain this gap in your resume? And you're like, oh yeah, I didn't have a fucking job.
Exactly.
What about why you don't have why are people leaving?
What about the gap in your staff? Can you explain that? Right?
So
it's like they think you become a drug mule in 3 months or something. My God, just give people access to work. Holy shit. Come on. Why are we making it so hard for people to survive? So glaring red flags, in an interview. And an interview is so interesting because I think there's a lot of, fear around interviewing, of course, especially if it's not something you do all the time. And this happens, with folks that have been with an employer for a long time, perhaps, and kind of, your older workers. Some may not even have resumes, and they're kind of, deterred from interviewing because it's like, oh, I haven't done it in forever. But it's important to remember that really an interview is just a conversation between two parties. It really is. And so, to that point, it's, a back and forth, as much as they're asking you questions, they're going to give you, hopefully, red flag if they don't, the opportunity to ask questions back. And all you're trying to suss out, literally, is whether you two can work with each other. Because if you are having an interview, you're already qualified to do the job. I can legally, hire you. It's fine. You meet the basic quals, whatever. No one's going to waste their time interviewing someone who doesn't meet the basic qualifications on the job or can do the job, right? So now all you're trying to figure it out is if it works or not. And you know what? Who cares if it doesn't? It may not. And so call a spade because it's kind of like dating in a way. You're going to be committing your life here. They're going to be committing dollars behind you. There's a tit for tat here. There's reciprocity here. It's not one-sided. And so if you go into it remembering that, I want to make sure that I'm taken care of and I fit as well, just as much, if not more, than whether they're trying to figure out whether that you'd fit in their team and their organization. It really takes the fear away. Right? Remember, the power is with the talent. You know what I mean? At any age, even someone that's completely new to the workforce, it's a huge commitment both ways. So kind of remember that. So, a couple red flags is if you are asking questions and you don't get the feeling that they're being authentic or genuine or they're trying to sidestep, because any interviewer, any hiring manager, any organization worth their weight, they're going to want to share the full gamut of what you're going to be walking into. They're going to respect you so much that they want you to know what you're about to experience and get into, good or bad, good and bad, right? So
because they want you to stay, right? Yeah. Here's what you can expect. This is the great stuff and this is the not so great stuff. If you can deal with all of that spectrum, cool, we want you, right? Because you don't want someone to walk out the door.
Exactly, because this is all costing money and taking time, right? And you're trying to relieve, folks in the organization that are suffering with the backfilling of work and all this and, so this matters. And so painting accurate pictures is so important. If you get the sense that they're not respecting your time, that's a huge red flag because that translates into the workplace itself. So this whole hiring process and recruitment process is just a peek into the employee experience. In fact, the employee experience potentially starts from that first reach out. From you putting your resume in and applying to that job, all the way to, you are an employee, right? All of that's the employee experience. And so however you're being treated, if, they're not responding.
It's like dating.
Right?
Courtship. They should be courting you hard, right?
Hello. Maybe they're just not that into stuff. You.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how they're going to be, though, when you're an employee. Yeah. They're going to continue to treat you like shit. Nothing magic happens when you get on payroll, except now you're getting paid to be treated like shit, as opposed to being treated like shit during the recruitment process for free. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? For free. All of that translates. Right. All of that translates over. So major red flags. flags. If if your time's not respected, guess what? That means they don't respect you, So just know that's going to translate to your work experience and your employee experience with that employer. And that ain't good. You know what I mean?
That ain't good. Flags, run for the hills. Flags. Get out. Yeah. No, you're totally right. I'm wondering what you think, because one thing that has irked me so much about the recent experiences I've had in the interview process with companies is that they expect me to do like a dissertation on their business problems before I get fucking paid a cent. And I'm like, at what point am I a consultant? Like, at what point, like, how many hoops? I am 40 years old. I know my shit. I've been in the corporate world for a long time. I know what I'm doing. Do you need to really see that I can put a PowerPoint together? Like, is this actually necessary? And so at what point do you view those sorts of exercises as toxic?
Well, I think they are all toxic. I think, again, I have a video on this.
Oh, you do? I missed this one. No.
Right? Like, I hate the case studies. I hate the special projects, the papers, all of that. Again, free labor that employers are exploiting their candidates for. And trust me, that they're taking that brain trust and that expertise from their candidates and they're translating into the workplace. And I think that is... huge red flag. I'm not doing that. Oof. I'm not doing that anymore. Again, I'm all about, pro accessibility to work and the respect of candidates and their previous experiences and education and knowledge. All of that translates into a new workplace, copy paste, right? And then you're just taught how to do a certain job or process in a new employer. But it's not like you're a total tabula rasa, blank slate, never have done anything before. And so trust me, they know that, and they are just exploiting the expertise and experiences of their candidates. And that is something so tech. That is something so tech. Oh, that is like that industry. And it is gross. It is so gross. And to me, I think it's intentionally exploitative. And it wouldn't surprise me if they already had like a preferred candidate for a job and they still do this to like 10 people to get ideas. And then they will give those ideas to that preferred candidate when they come into the role and say, oh, we love these ideas from four. I know, you got to breathe, right? I mean, they legit do that. Like, that's okay. No, it's crap.
Oh man, my basest fears. Yeah, it is. I mean, people are busy and exhausted and stressed. They're trying to make it work at their current job. And then you add this on top of the pile.
I think you should be paid to interview. I think employers should cut checks to candidates, especially when they get to 2+ rounds of interviewing. And especially when they have to do things like this. I mean, I've had an interview that lasted 2 days. I had to fly out for it. It was just back to back, dinner party, you name it. You know what I mean? And so if fit means that much to you should be paying for all of that by hour.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so otherwise it's just exploitative, but it gives you a sense, again, red flag. It tells you flat out, trust it. You're witnessing it. It tells you flat out what an organization values and how they will treat you, value you or not, when you are actually on payroll. So if they're okay exploiting all these people and stealing ideas, what are they going to do when you get inside? It means you're going to produce work and your boss is going to put their name on it.
Yeah. You're so right. Oh my God.
That's how that translates. And it's okay to them to do that because we're a family here.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of which, for me, that's the biggest red flag of all. If someone says we're a family, I'm grateful if they say it before I accept the job offer, because I'm like, I'm out. No, thanks. We're not a family. We are not a family. You're going to axe me like without a second. Like that is, no family talk.
Yeah,
I hate the family
right.
talk.
Exactly.
Awful. So Leigh, one thing that I've noticed in interviewing is that typically when I go to the initial sort of recruitment, a recruiter sort of gatekeeper, are you not a psychopath call, which is what I typically assume those really are.
A phone screen.
Maybe I'm wrong. A phone screen. Yes, thank you. Can you carry on a conversation like a normal human being? Like that's how I usually view those.
Are you real?
Are you real? Are you AI generated? Exactly.
Are you a bot?
Yeah, exactly. You never know these days.
You never do.
I have noticed, though, when I go to those, typically the person with whom I'm speaking is junior to me by a long shot. And I've spoken with my friends who are far older than I am, looking at tech jobs now. And they've told me that this is the case and that they might not even see someone anywhere within spitting distance of their age until they're far far down the interview process, if ever. And so I'm wondering, like, do you have advice for people who are going into these situations who are older and might be faced with someone who looks very different from them, and how they can overcome their anxiety around, like, oh, maybe this person's not going to see me as a culture fit, which is the term I despise, by the way. But what would you say to those people who might find themselves in that situation with a very junior person?
Yeah, well, what I'd say is, especially if it's a phone screen, just as an FYI, the majority of right, the majority of those, professionals doing that job are HR coordinators, recruitment coordinators. This is the first, perhaps, the first professional job they may have had, right? And they're really doing a very, heavy administrative type of role where they may be phone screening 100 people a day plus, right? Depending on the industry, depending on the positions that they're hiring for. And so I would say, diversity works both ways, right? I mean, if you want to be respected for your age, definitely respect that individual as well, regardless, right? And so a lot of times those more, green or junior employees will give the feedback that they weren't even treated with respect on these calls. They were dismissed, right?
Terrible.
And
That's
so it's wonderful when you just have two professional people just having a professional conversation. And as a candidate, definitely treat every single interaction with the company as an interview. Number one, right? So treat anyone and everyone with respect and dignity. I've definitely heard stories, and I've been part of a situation too, where like the driver of a car or the elevator person or the janitor was actually a hiring manager plant, or, someone on the recruitment team just, trying to figure out if this candidate treats someone with dignity and respect at all levels in an organization. So it's very, very important to do that, right? Hopefully you value that the way I value that, right? But that's definitely the advice I would give, is just to respect that more junior employee, and really cross your fingers and hope that they have that same sort of frame of mind. So again, you can't control anybody else; you can only control yourself. But you biasing somebody else, of course, I think gives more, a chance for them to then bias you back, right? Because they felt disrespected and whatever, But again, any interaction from a talent acquisition, recruitment, hiring perspective, it's all about the chemistry. And so I do understand where that worry comes from on, how can I connect with somebody younger? But just remember that, if you are an older, more seasoned employee, perhaps you are mentoring others. You have perhaps children. They could be that same age. You have nieces, nephews, people in your lives, friends or whatever that are going to be similar like age. You know how to relate to people at every single age, just like you know how to relate to people 20 years older than you. You know what I mean? Totally. So it's the same sort of thing. Remember, it's just a conversation and connection with another human being, and just go into it just with like that respect and professionalism mindset. You know what I mean? And I think you'll get a lot further. And just really, as much as you can, again, whether the phone screener is junior or not, it's your job as the candidate to try and translate everything on your resume and everything you've ever done in your life, to what's applicable to that new organization. So you're creating those connections. You're painting the scene and the picture for that person. You're connecting all the dots for them. You know what I mean? And so connect the dots for that junior employee, So you may even help them with that, right? You may help them understand the job even better because, again, they've probably got 20 different jobs they're recruiting for, right? So you can connect those dots.
You can help them. That's absolutely true.
You can help them without even them realizing that you're helping them. The job said this, and I have that. And here's how I've done it.
Yeah.
So
that's so true.
Do that and sell yourself, right? And
love
connect those dots. Yeah.
And just don't get in your own way. Like, don't put these thoughts in it's hard sometimes to get them out of your head, right? They're subconscious. They come up, but smash them down, own your expertise, own your experience. I think that's for sure the way to go. Leigh, for those of us who find ourselves in toxic workplaces, what is your advice on how to get the F out? How do we get out of these? How do we get out of these toxic places?
Well, boy, that is the $20,000 question, right? I myself have had to do that, and many of us have in our careers, right? But, the number one piece of advice that I would give is that you have got to accept the reality that you're in. And oftentimes we do not, because change is hard and the unknown is hard, better the enemy, like you kind of hear those sorts of phrases, right?
So true.
But if you don't accept the reality that you're in, and what I mean by that is if you're not honest with how you're really feeling and what you're not receiving and how you're not thriving, and, the people around you that don't value you and you don't perhaps value them back. If you're not honest about that and accepting of that reality, you will never be spurred to action. You will never take the actions required to get out of that workplace. We lie to ourselves every day. We say things like, oh, well, if only the boss gets a new job and moves to Nicaragua, everything would be fine. Right?
Which is totally going to happen really soon. Just keep waiting,
Right? If only all of these people win the lottery and then they all leave, then I'll be fine, right? If they change the work location and 50,000 policies here, then it would be a real fit for me.
Right. Yeah,
none of that shit is going to happen. Okay. And just pretend it's not. Yeah. Pretend it's not. Accept the reality today and pretend that the reality that you're in today is the forever reality. And so if you tell yourself that nothing's going to change and this is the forever reality, what would you then do different? Because I bet you would do something different. As opposed to say optimistically hopeful that all these 20,000 things are going to change. So then you can be comfortable finally. You know what I mean?
And don't throw good time after bad either. It's like cut your losses. Sometimes it's just not a fit. You got to move on and get out of that toxicity.
Yeah. And to your point, if it is really bad and it is really toxic, fuck the 2 weeks. Save yourself. Because as someone that has seen just the most tragic things, unaliving, violence, crime, because of where I sit, in an HR capacity, it is not worth it. It is not worth it. If you're engaging in self-harm, you're having, thoughts, all of this, which happens from a workplace, from a job. It happens.
It happens
too much. It is heartbreaking. It's horrific, but just leave. If you're not in that situation, you just know that it doesn't fit. It's not suiting you and all of this. I highly recommend deciding what's next before you leave, right? So that you feel more in control, right? And that what's next may be retirement or a break or a whole new career transition in job, industry, location, you name it. But trying to get your kind of your mind ready, it helps you manifest that to actually be. You know what I mean? So deciding what's next before you leave, if you can, and I hope that you can, is very advantageous.
Yes, it is. It sure is. And I think infusing as much humor and levity into situations and knowing that you're not alone. Like I know you've had many people reach out to you and tell you their horror stories, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you showcase them on your channels, on your social media channels. So I definitely want to encourage everybody in the audience to go and check you out on the socials. So I'm going to put them all in the show notes. Oh my gosh, you're hilarious. I mean, I have loved your content so much because it's giving voice to the masses who are feeling this, right? And it's just adding humor. Like we're all in this shit together, and it's not just you. You're not alone. And, and you also have a lot of really great advice. Like you said, you do coaching within these comedy videos that's really constructive. It's very helpful. So I think we can all not only laugh a lot by looking at your content, but we can also learn a lot. So I'm just so grateful that you made the time to be here, and thank you so much for joining me.
Yes. Well, I'm honored to be here with you, and I'm honored that, you enjoy the content and, and you invited me to be here, because of that. And like I said, my hope, is to just help others, and I hope that the content helps others and resonates with others and really just kind of spurs them to action to take better care of themselves first.
I think it really is working. So thank you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
It's so fantastic. And spoiler alert, for those of you who love Leigh, good news is she is going to be a podcaster herself in the relatively near future. So we'll make sure that we put the show notes updated with your show once it's out there. So
Yes. Well, thank you so much for that shout out. I'm excited. I definitely, I don't know if I've got a face for TV, but I got a voice for podcasting. I know that much.
You got it all. You got it all. You have an excellent voice. I could listen to you. Could read me bedtime stories. It would work very well.
ASMR. Maybe that's what the podcast is. I don't know. We'll see.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Leigh. This was so much fun.
Thank you, Mo. All the best to you.